A clang on the door announces the arrival of Ohebs, cutting off any further conversation. I wrench the door open. That took long enough, I bark. Karst is on the other side, no sign of Carol, Nazarek, or the others. She has a panicked look that immediately sets my heart racing. What is it? Orcs! Coming down through the waste scrub, she gushes, moving from one foot to another, causing her upright crest of hair to sway like a bird's feathers. An uphiver by birth, Karst fled down here when the orcs invaded. She'd always been a bit skittish, but she was loyal. Why? Why'd they be coming down, Hive? She shrugs, agitation growing. Skisky Ron says there's a lot of them. A lot. My brain finally starts paying attention to the background noise. Shouts, echoing up from the sump hall. The thud of dozens of feet moving, clawing down steps. The creak of metal as the gantries shake under the movement of the crowd. I see the fear in Karst's eyes and imagine it multiplied 100-fold by my followers in the sump hall. I dash back to the other room, snatch up my las pistol, and then head out of the door. She turns away, eager to be moving too, eyes straying back down the passageway. Where's Carol gone? People are gonna die in the stampede. I grab her shoulder, dragging her attention back to me. Where's Carol? He went to the sump gates to lock the portal. It's too late for that. If there's orcs in the waste scrub, I say. She glances down at my finger, dragging through the material of her vest. I let go, stepping back. Head down into the walk-arounds. Round up everyone you can. Take them to the downflow. Downflow? There are orcs at the other end of the downflow. Less than up Hive. What's your plan? Run, I say. Get everybody out of the sumpways first, and worry about what's next once we're out of here. A slow clanging begins in the pipes, running along the length of the passageway and up to the sump hall. A trickling follows after, becoming a stronger flow, the brackets rattling as liquid surges on the long disused pipeways. What does that signify? Asks the colonel, looking up. I start down the passage, grabbing Karst's wrist so that she follows. It means Carol was too late, and now he's flooding the drop drains to slow down the orcs. A siren joins the sound of gushing water, intermittent and distant. I feel Karst shudder at the noise and increase my pace to a jog, glancing back to make sure Schaefer is following. And that's a signal from the flue yards. They're coming at us both ways. My jog becomes a run as shouts echo down the passage from the sump hall. A question keeps hammering at my thoughts, and I let out a snarl. Why now? What are they after? As I feared, the sump hall is in pandemonium. Those on the upper level are climbing back through the pipe vents. But that's going to take them into the runnerways that crisscross the broken hive floor above. No way out there except back into the sump or into the path of the orcs. Those lower down the viewing galleries are heading to the floor, some of them trying to push others, clawing their way forward. Fights have broken out, adding to the mayhem. I thought you were better prepared for attack, says the colonel as we reach my throne platform. How have you survived for so long? The Underhive orcs are scrawny things, like the jungle pharaohs we fought. There's not enough down here for them to feed on. Nazarek says, so they can't get too big. The hive orcs, they don't bother coming down here because there's nothing worth taking and nothing worth fighting. Until now, I shrug. I don't know. Nothing's changed. My gaze settles on the prisoners, sitting huddled and confused in a ring of my fighters. The escorts don't look happy, caught up between the job of keeping them captive and the spreading panic. I see a few of them have made a run for it already. Maybe they thought there was a new attack, I say, letting go of Karst. I point her to the steps to my left. Go on, round up who you can. She bolts off without a look back. Maybe the orcs heard a rumor of Imperial soldiers coming to the Underhive and came to say hello. You think this is my fault? The colonel shakes his head. There are hundreds of thousands of soldiers camped outside Acheron. Why would the orcs pay attention to a single platoon? Rumors can kill, I say. A platoon becomes a company, becomes a regiment. And if those up high orcs have been getting as cranky as the ones we've been scalping lately, itching for a fight, any excuse. I wave my hands and start yelling, trying to attract the attention of the mob turning down the sump hall, imploring them to slow down, to stop panicking. Some turn, steps faltering. Others plow on towards the door at the far end. A vertical gate that used to be for algae scrapers to access the main sump that I turn into an audience hall. With me! I bellow at the guards, grabbing the lasgun from the closest as I reach them. Some of them look at the colonel and the captives, slow to react. Don't worry about them. Come with me. Schaefer musters the soldiers while I push on with mine, calling for people to calm down as I wade through the crowd. The command starts to ripple outwards, too slowly for some, pressed tight in the back and trampled as they fall. Clear the way! Out of the way! As I shout, I slap my hand on the shoulder of Yusuf, one of the guards. Get over to the steps on the other side. Slow everything down. Nobody's getting out of here if we panic. He nods and sets off with some of the others. They're my best, like Carol and his lot, ex-Imperial Guard, veterans of the Orc War, clear-headed, but some of them not so dependable. Given the company I've kept before, they're a pretty solid bunch. Schaefer stays close to me, happy to follow for the moment. I start dragging people back, forcing my way into the crush as we get closer and closer to the gateway. Like line passing buckets at a fire drill, we pull people away and move them to the back, like we're digging through the crowd. Finally, we get to the gate, parting the last press like a blade, forcing a few through the gap in front of us. Two at a time, no more. I growl to the men and women around me, passing through the gate. Take the east stride to the downflow. I linger just on the far side of the gate to make sure everything is in hand. There's some tussles as they establish the new system, but I hear the message spreading through the mob. Just the smallest hint of order, or someone with a plan, settles the mood over the couple of minutes. Follow on. When the last ones are out, I tell my people, receiving nods and comply. There's a steady stream of folks heading down the dimly lit passage, turning left at the fork at the end, further into the depths. The tramp of feet on Faircrete is continuous, filling the space along the smell of smoke and sweat. A breeze waves from the clinking recycling unit at the far end, bringing up the stench of old water still trapped in the sump heads. We'll hook up with Carol by the deep bounds and then lead the way through the downflow, I tell Schaefer. I'm just on the verge of thinking we can keep this under control when the whole passage shudders and a boom thunders around us, cascading dust and rust from the ceiling. A few shouts from behind warn that not all is well, and I half turn in time to see a fresh tide of people surging through the gate, shouting and screaming. Armory that way, says Schaefer. He's already moving a heartbeat later, snapping off orders to have his group fall in. I feel a shiver course up my spine and catch a glance of a familiar face as they go past. It's Ohebs, the psychic gnoll, glaring at me, and then he's lost in the shadows of the gloomy corridor. The Burned Man! The cry comes from a woman in the crowd, hidden by the masses, her voice almost lost in the returning chorus of shouts and cries. Bless me! Bless me! Her intent is caught by others, and some of them break away from the general movement, coming towards me with hands outstretched, eyes alight with desperation. The Burned Man! They call, hoping that I can somehow save them with my presence, my touch. Frag this, I snarl to no one in particular. I break into a run, weaving through people streaming down the east stride. The corridor broadens out into a wider, vaulted hall. There's a section where the underhive has shifted over the centuries, creating a drop of about 10 meters. Walkways of scavenged metal and plastique cabling zigzag down the Fair Creek cliff. I take the shorter route, leaping from one to the next. I reach the bottom just as another boom of detonations rolls from above. Everyone else is streaming across the split hall, the remains of an old pumping station to the right. But I head left. There's a shortcut here, providing you can pull yourself about 5 meters of cable and squeeze through a crawl hole I wouldn't wish on a servitor. I haul myself up the improvised rope, through the access hatch, getting a face full of stinking, hot fumes flowing from somewhere up high. My eyes sting, my nostrils burn. I keep my mouth clamped tight as I wriggle across the maintenance flue and push open the grill on the other side. Head first, I roll out of the pipe, coming to my feet on a haphazard scaffold platform. Rotten wood almost gives way under the boots as I edge along the planks to a corroded ladder at the end. Straight down is a 100-meter drop into the undersump. Nothing down there but rats and slow death. I step onto the ladder, then jump across a small gap to a more solid ledge on the other side, the remains of an old inspection walkway around the outside of the main sump container. Ducking through a service gap, avoiding the last vestiges of jagged glass around me, I come back to the east stride, avoiding the massive dogleg around the pump station remains. Dropping the last meter into the ground, I give myself time to think. It'll be another minute or two before anyone else catches up from the long way around, though I can hear them coming. There's a junction just 5 meters away, a sort of nexus between the main sump and dozens of access routes that must have led to the monitoring stations. Hab blocks, Emperor knows where else. Most of it's rubble choked, impossible to get through now. The strideways and tunnels dug through the broken rock creep, a lot of them collapsed again. 3 that I know of keep going. The eastern corridor curves around the downflow, a massive dry drain system where the orcs have created a settlement. The moisture is good for them, and we have to use flamers to keep their fungal spread from creeping too far back into the pipes. There's the southeast corridor that leads deeper into orc territory. About another 2 kilometers in hive as we near can tell. It's where our patch joins with a broken expanse known as the waste scrub. No point going that way, though. Straight to the hive orcs. And the north way. I linger for a moment, looking down in the black passage. It's just about big enough for a person to go along at a crouch. Whiffs of gas pockets mean you don't want to take a naked flame down there with you, and portable power cells are rarer than Commissar Smiles down here, so it's a 3-hour pitch but black crawl. After that, there's a good chance of getting out to the hive rim. It's too small for the orcs to use, and too treacherous for a group to evacuate, so it'd be just me. I tell myself that I've changed. I felt the touch of the Emperor on my soul, and that's got to mean something. He didn't keep me alive just so I could scab together a half-assed cult for him and then run away when it got dangerous. I'm the burned man. I have followers, people depending on me. A whole bunch of folks have put their trust in me, their faith. And still my body is ignoring my good intentions, keeping me hovering at the junction instead of turning to the east strideway like I'm supposed to. A guttural shout causes me to flinch, instinct almost throwing me into darkness before I process the sound. Boss! Nazarick bellows again, lumbering towards me from the southeast tunnel, Drott scampering at its heels. Beyond them, I see Carol, with beard braids swaying, about 10 others coming at me quickly. My guilt makes me keenly aware where I'm standing, and I step back from the north passage, as though putting distance between me and it will allay their suspicions. What's the news? I ask as the orc and Carol reach me. Never seen anything like it, says Carol. Big, green, grunts Nazarick. The orc raps the side of his head with bulging knuckles. Feel big green in here. Lots of green. All coming this way, lots of war. This last sound is delivered as a deafening shout. Thousands, I'd say, Carol continues, expression haunted. I just opened the flood bars and ran. Angry, very shouty, Nazarek adds. Grot says something in his chirpier voice. Its ears are flat against its head, a sign of worry. Nazarek snarls back, and Grot scampers away a few strides, hiding behind Carol's leg, red eyes glaring up at the orc. We'll keep moving, I tell him, starting towards the east passage. I'm sending everyone out through the downflow. Keep tight together. We might catch the under orcs by surprise. Not good, says Nazarek, shaking his head, thick lips curling into a grimace. Big green. Downruns feel big green too. No other choice, I say. I turn as I hear footsteps coming down from behind us. The first of the folks fleeing the sump hall, emerging from the distant shadows. It's not so much a rush now, more a moving huddle. The braver followers leading the way in small clumps, most of them carrying pipes, sharpened metal shivs, and other improvised weapons. Go with them. Don't start through the downflow yet, I tell Carol. Nazarek moves to follow him as he steps away, but I grab the orc's arm. Stick with me. Tell me more about what you feel in the big green. How far away is the hive mob? Is not scanner, boss, it replies with a shrug. It's odd how it's picked up some of our words and expressions. A surprisingly quick learner. When I think back to the grunts and bellows that it used to make up half of Nazarek's speech. It says it's because the green is strong in Armageddon. It makes orcs smarter. Hearing about the stuff of the great beast Gazgul, I can believe it. Like, you feel hotter, but can't say how close or fire is getting a lot hotter. Right, I say with a nod. People are moving past in murderous numbers now, scores of them. I see Karst among the crowd and give her a thumbs up. She looks afraid but manages a hesitant smile in return. The orc grunts and turns its head back down towards the tunnel, leading to the waste scrub, eyes narrowed. Is noisy loud. That's the second time you've said that. What do you mean? What's loud? Big green is loud, boss, the orc says, squinting down at me. Its brow furrows. Big green, sort of like buzz and head. More orcs is bigger buzz, louder noise. Big green is big loud, not just green. Something else, too. Bigger loud. Bigger loud. Sorta. Different loud. Blood loud. I don't really have any idea what Nazarek is talking about, except I can feel a pinch at the nape of my neck. It's been that way for the last few minutes, and I thought it was tension, but it's like a pulsing that isn't in time to my heartbeat. The pressure I felt before creeping down my spine, compressing my backbone with its weight. Louder. What's louder, I think? Keep moving, I shout, waving the crowd on to distract myself from disturbing half-formed thoughts. Those with weapons to the front. Report to Carol. I linger for another half minute, urging folks onward. I see Schaefer moving with the crowd, a head taller than everybody else. He surges through them, parting people with growled commands and sheer pressure. The rest of the last chancers following behind. They have a mix of las guns and autoguns, a few with pistols. Schaefer tosses a las pistol to me as he breaks from the stream of people turning towards the downflow. I take the lead, striding purposely along the side of the descending crowd, calling for people to make room ahead. The flow of people starts to slow down, gathering them together, 100 meters or so from the broken valve station that opens on the downflow. Keep moving, I tell them, waving them forward. They seem sluggish, reluctant to press further onwards. A few whisper pleas and desperate moans greet me as I arrive. Not everyone is used to marching into danger, the colonel reminds me. Most people try to move away from it. I hadn't given it a second thought. I guess I'm just used to commanding deadly. I guess I'm just used to confronting deadly enemies head on. Thanks to you. He raises an eyebrow but doesn't say anything. Get going, I shout at the dawdlers. What about the orcs? Someone from the crowd asks. We haven't gotten any guns. The ones behind us ain't gonna be any nicer, I remind them. Still, a lot of them seem hesitant. The initial panic worn off. The thought of moving into danger, when they seem safe, too much to overcome. I raise my voice. I've stared down death too many times to remember. But what do you want to hear? The one thing I know for sure is what will get you killed quicker than anything else? Some of them demand to know the answer, almost begging their fear. Not trying to stay alive, I tell them. I point to the tunnel. We're going that way, with our guns. The orcs are coming from us from behind, so if you want to live, come with us. I don't wait for any more debate and set off, shoulders set, eyes fixed ahead. I hear the tramp of the Departamento Minotaurian boots behind me, and the colonel and his troopers, and then a more diffuse shuffling as the crowd gets moving again. I pick up the pace, not sure how long we have, until the hive mob are going to be on us. I'd rather be deep in Sumprunt territory before then. There are different kinds of orcs, and I think that this book nearly does a better job of it than the last one. The main reason Cage and his band of followers can even exist is because the Underhive orcs are too scrawny, and the Uphive orcs don't really even want to go to the Underhive. My neighbor went across the ocean. I don't know how well the camera can see this, but he got me this coin at a game where it's awesome. It's awesome. It's a Chaos Space Marine guy. Very, very delighted. Very delighted. Very delighted to have this. It matches my tattoo. Very delighted. Very delighted to have this coin. This might be the last piece of Games Workshop merchandise I will ever hold. Oh. Even though I call the third book Green Body Bags, they actually don't fight that many orcs in the book. And the reason why it's important that there's like different kinds of orcs is the orc battle has to be dynamic. I think with Caiaphas Cain and also with that awesome book 15 Hours, um, the main like orc battle trope that is really fun to explore is underestimating the orc, because they always like I'm fairly certain there's almost as much orc fighting in the first book as there is in the third book. It's just it's kind of difficult to make the orc battle, I think, seem dynamic from the view of the guardsman, because it's, you know, you shoot them and then oh no, they got close. There is something, I guess I didn't pick that up before. There's something on Armageddon that makes the orcs smarter, which is, I guess, cool. I can't fathom what that would be. It talks about it like it's different than just WOG. It's like a special WOG that, I mean, I'm glad they have that disclaimer, because you can't see both my eyes, but one of them was kind of rolling at the fact that there's just like a pet orc that hangs out. The orcs from the third book, they were not capable of speech, and the reason why they hung out, they weren't actually like anybody's bodyguard. They were von Strab's captors. Even the fire pit people, they were like, they thought that the orcs were there as like supervisors or something, but they were really um they did not care for the Firefather at all. I think one of them, yeah, the Cage took the Firefather as a hostage, and the orc just started laughing and started just pistol shooting both of them. I do think though during the Firefather skirmish, somebody should have died, because it was. I mean, people did, but no one important died. There's about 100 gun armed followers with Carol at the filtration valve station. A yawning pipe, about 5 meters high, cuts through the broken debris, straight into the artificial mountainside we call the downflow. Any sign of the orcs? I ask, seeing other lamplights through the pipe. Not yet, Carol replies. He glances past me at the colonel and the glass chancers, eyes widening as he sees the weapons on their backs. His eyes come back to me, full of suspicion. What's the plan, Bird Man? Don't worry about them, I say, flashing a grin at the colonel. They're just as keen to get out of here as the rest of us. The colonel looms closer, passing a scrutinizing glare over at my militia. How many orcs live down here? He asks. Hundreds, says Carol. I sense the colonel is formulating a plan, but this isn't his company. This isn't his mission. But spread out, mostly, I add, cutting him off. Big green louder, Nazarek tells us, jabbing a heavy bladed pistol down the pipe. Downrun's coming. Hear the loud green. We're here to get through, not raid, I remind Carol and the others. Move fast. Don't get stuck in a big fight. Which way through? He asks with a slight shake of his head. Got to head east to get out, Hive. But I don't know how anyone that's gone maybe more than a kilometer. I don't know anyone that's gone maybe a kilometer that way. Could just run straight into a dead end and get trapped. I look back up the tunnel and see that a lot of my people have arrived, over 1,000 altogether. They're quiet, either sensible enough not to draw attention of the orcs, or too subdued by what's happening to talk. Either way, that's still a lot of deadweight to carry around. Not deadweight, I remind myself. My people, the followers of the burned man, servants of the emperor drawn here by my faith. We need to do this properly, I tell Carol, signaling for a few others to get closer. Lead squads, the scout that way. Advance in elements. 5 groups maybe. About 100 in each. Your people are not disciplined enough for that, argues the colonel, glancing over his shoulder at the huddled masses. Even with escorts, which ones are going to have the courage to wait? Fine, good point, I growled back, hating that he's right, and hating it more that I hadn't thought of it. Scout group and main group it is. Put out 2 picket squads to watch the flanks, 10 in each. Good eyes and ears, nobody flighty. Carol nods, looking away as he thinks of candidates. The colonel steps closer, voice low. He addresses his words to Carol, but his gaze lingers on me for a moment longer than I'm comfortable with. We need dependable scouts. Nobody that's going to think it is a good idea to just make a run for it. I'll be with the main body, I add somewhat quickly. I realize, damn the colonel's doubts, making me overreact. A thump resounds down the tunnel, causing an outburst of cries and complaints from the jittery crowd. That'll be the barricades I lowered at the crosswalks, the crossfins. Carol grimaces as he looks back. They're less than half a kilometer away. We need to go, I say, pushing him towards the filtration chamber. Take the scouts ahead. We'll follow. Carol moves on, picking out a few men and women as he does. The others are shuffling closer, starting to push towards the downflow access. I'm aware of the looming colonel, his presence distracting me. How about you make yourself useful and stop any stragglers? I say to him. You want me at the back? His eyes narrow. Closest to the orcs? I sigh and shake my head. If none of us get out, that's no good for me, is it? I say, disappointed by his low opinion, but forced to address it in terms he'd expect. I'd rather you watch our backs than anyone else. That seems to be a good enough answer to him. For the moment, at least. He takes a handful of the squad and pushes back to the approaching people, urging them onward. I take up the call, telling them to move on fast, but steady, sending several more folks with guns every few seconds. In a line about 5 wide, 100 meters long, we worm our way across the downflow, a great ferrocrete slope, just shallow enough to clamber down, illuminated by an ancient glow strip nearly 20 meters long, powered from Emperor knows where. It's the last light we're not carrying with us. And as we snake into the tunnel beyond, an old outflow pipe that breaks about 300 meters on, we bring out lanterns and hand lumens. Beams of yellow, blue, and white dance across the rusted pipeway, accompanied by the clatter of footfalls and the swell of mass breathing. The surroundings growing colder, while exhalations fog the air. Nazareth stops at my right shoulder, grunting every few steps. Behind, the patter of Grot's bare feet. I glance at the orc, its red eyes reflecting the light of the lanterns. What do you feel? Green! Everywhere! It says, turning its head left and right. Green and blood! Blood and green! Hurts in my brain! I take this to mean the downruns are close. But there's been nothing from my scouts yet. If there had been an attack, we would have heard gunshots and shouts. What are they waiting for? We pass a few abandoned workshops and tool rooms, bare carcasses long stripped of anything useful, filled with shadows and disturbing creaks where machinery used to be. It's not just generations of human scavengers that have passed through here. Patches of fungus puff clouds of spores in the air, dusting the bare rockcrete. The smell is unmistakable, and I see Nazareth sniffling intently. Old, the orc says. Weak. Can you work out which way they are? The orc stomps about for a bit. Then the rest of the crowd move through the workshops, huddling together like a prey herd, eyes in all directions. Those of us armed create a kind of corridor for them to move along, standing guard at stairwells and archways, passing ahead and keeping watch to the rear. A moving, protective pocket. I'm surprised that we haven't run into any of the downruns. Whatever has stirred the orcs from up high maybe hasn't reached down here yet. Let's keep going, quick as we can, I say now and then, repeating it slowly and calmly, so as to not set off another stampede. If people panic down here, they'll head off in all directions, and we'll never get them out. Getting closer, warns Nazarick as we pass through the remains of an old scriptorium. I can tell what it was by the raised overseer plinth at the far end, and the rust-lined holes in the floor where benches and lecterns used to be secured. Overhead, out of reach, rusting lumen chandeliers continue to flicker, intermittently leeching off the underground thermal energy grid. Through a half-collapsed corridor, we pass single file into the dormitories, probably of those long-forgotten scribes, rooms large enough for a score of beds, each flank a central passageway, 8 on each side. There are scraps of metal and discarded rags here, and one of the rooms reeks of orc shit. As we get closer, the stench becomes almost unbearable. Fungal growths as large as me cling to the walls, forcing us to hack and batter our way through. Every blow of blade and gun butt releasing more pungent sores in the air. Strange bugs skitter along brightly colored fronds, mandibles working with anticipation, while larger creatures scuttle noisily through an undergrowth of smaller, drab growths. As we press on, Grot stops, stooping to pick up handfuls of mushrooms from the corner of the floor and jamming some straight into his mouth, others into a small bag tied around his waist. Nazarick pushes past, carelessly snapping stems and trampling fungi underfoot, straining its green skin with smears of yellow and red. The orc crouches in the midst of the fungus and makes strange, soft grunts, a hand out. Something about as long as my forearm slithers out of the fungal copse, like a centipede, with disturbingly orcish features. A cluster of antennae wave around its red eyes, feeling Nazarick, who clutches deep into its chest at the touch. I watch fascinated as the alien lifts up the orcipede, stroking a finger along its length. Nazarick straightens, pinching the orcipede hard on the head. Glistening fangs stab out like switchblades, dripping with green fluid. Nazarick lifts the bug high, letting the venom fall into his outstretched tongue. The orc smacks its lips, takes the orcipede in both hands, and twists the head off with a deft movement. Casting the head aside, Nazarick quickly opens the hard carapace with long nails, exposing green, oozing flesh beneath, which it deposits into an open mouth with relish. The orc belches and turns to me. Birdman want? It asks. Not hungry, I say quickly, which is saying something given what I've had to eat in the past. Nazarick shrugs and bends to grab Grot by the neck. The smaller orcoid snatches the last few mushrooms into its mouth before being flung along the corridor, a threatening growl from Nazarick hurrying it along the way. That whole part, he just Gavthorpe just does this where it's just like, oh great, now we know what an orcipede is. I mean, it's welcome, I guess, because I'd never really fathomed what the orcish ecosystem is, and I mean I know that they raise squigs and eat squigs, but they probably have an entire lineup of similar things. The orcipede, yeah, I don't remember the orcipede from before. I don't even know what that last. It wasn't. I don't know what he does with Grot. He just kicks him. He throws him around. I think I remember that the mushrooms come in handy later. They do something. The orcipede, yeah. I don't know if the orcipede will be found in the Orcipedia. there's something like just the way the book's written for me, and I mean it's even on the title. Maybe I'm just paying the cover too much heed. But everything in this book seems like it seems more streamlined. It seems like silkier, smoother than the old Warhammer had this like layer of dust on it that it was just this very fine layer of dust, kind of like the dust you find at old people's house, not the dust you find at slobs' houses, where like everything's in its place, but if you examine something closer, you can free it from its dusty prison. No, the orchopede scene is why Warhammer nerds get called nerds. We don't need the orchopede. But I think that's something that Gavthorpe does, because I am fairly certain those mushrooms come in handy later. He will like bombard you with a bunch of details. He'll have like a red herring, and like for me, I'm fixated on the orchopede. Though I mean, look, the whole scene would have been really great if it was like an actual claymation thing. It would be awesome. It'd be like Jim Henson or something. But yeah, the mushrooms. This is a special tool that we might need to use for later, however it goes. There's a flood of reaction ahead, preceding the arrival of Binsa, one of the scouts. She carries her las gun slung over her shoulder, a long knife in hand. "We found prisoners, Bernard man," she says as she comes up to me, "chained up in one of the rooms ahead." Oh yeah, the prisoners. The prisoner, yeah, this is Cage's best moral conundrum. I remember the prisoners. "Okay, show me," I reply, beckoning for Nazarek to follow. We overtake the others and find Carol at a branch junction, a smaller corridor of rough ferrocrete, heading off to the right. A set of steps a few meters long. I can hear moaning and a whispered urging for silence coming along the passageway. "Prisoners? Ours?" I ask as I fall beside Carol, turning towards the steps. "Don't recognize them," she tells me, leading me to the left on the landing of the bottom of the steps, through a doorless frame into a low, broad chamber barely high enough to stand in. It smells like a company latrine, mixed with the ever-present fungal stench of orc spore. There is nothing in the room except for a gaggle of 7 people, 3 women, 4 men, chained to a ring on the far wall, the wheel of a pump cycle protruding from a metal plate next to them. There's a fly-ridden pile of human waste in the far corner, at the furthest extent of the chain's reach, and scraps of food scattered about. Some of the slaves cry out when they see me, shocked by my scars, I guess. They babble, trying to form words, lifting bloodied hands towards us. The light from Carol's lantern causes them all to flinch back. I grab his arm, directing the beam away, seeing the pain it's causing them. "Frag!" I say, at a loss for any other words. Scabs circle their ankles where the shackles bind them. Their legs, covered in filth, down to their waists and further. They're pretty much the same grimy color as the walls, and when they speak, I see bloodied gums, studded with a few teeth, like bunkers on a defense line. "Frag!" I say again. I thought we'd seen everything, but I was wrong. "Heh!" Help! One of the women manages, pushing herself, trembling on her feet. They're all naked. I can see whorls where flesh worms have burrowed through their skin, and dark lesions from rust dagger spores. Then I see that one of them hasn't moved since I entered. I direct Carol's lamp into the supine form and see flies buzzing around empty eye sockets, dead for some time, orc fungus growing from patches on the skin, maggots creeping around rotten wounds. This time, it's Carol that gives vent to our disgust. Frag! He covers his mouth, retching. Frag this! Frag this! Keep it together, I grunt, grabbing his arm. I take the lantern away, swinging it to illuminate the chains. Not thick, but also not thin. The sound of movement causes me to turn. What is? The colonel trails off, standing in the doorway, head tilted. If it's bad enough to unsettle the colonel, you know it's bad. There's a moment when he looks disgusted, replaced by visible anger. Not often you see a reaction like that. Mumbled pleading from the prisoners drags my attention back to them. They're straining at their chains, pawing at the dirty floor with blistered fingers. It's like they've forgotten how to walk, just grunting and saying please and help over and over again. What are you going to do? Asks Carol, as if that's any kind of sensible question. It's obvious there's not a lot we can do. They will slow you down, says the colonel, face impassive again. It's true, but the words feel like an accusation coming from Schaefer. What goes unsaid is that I'll just abandon these unfortunates to look after myself. He doesn't see it, but I feel the judgment all the same. Gun! I gesture to Carol. He hands over his rifle, and I pull the magazine out. I pop a bullet from the top, reload the magazine, and pass the weapon back on to him. What are you doing, Cage? Asks the colonel, concerned. The orcs will be here in minutes, one way or the other. I give him silence in reply, walking over to the wall where the ring is embedded in plascrete. I dig a hole with my knife, just enough to wedge the bullet between the ring and steel and the wall. Stepping back, I drag the las pistol from my belt and take aim. Cage! I ignore Schaefer and pull the trigger, a bolt of light striking the bullet square. The small detonation tears a chunk out of the wall, enough so that two of the bolts on the ring break free. The prisoners realize what is happening and surge together, their wasted muscles straining at their chains. I grab Lynx and fists and pull two, Carol behind me, and a few seconds later, rusting metal screeches, and the plate falls clear, throwing us all to the dirty ground. The prisoners start laughing, clustering around me, grinning madly. Now what? Growls the colonel. He points at the chains, still shackling them together, threaded through the heavy ring. Get some others, I tell Carol. He hesitates, not sure what I mean. So I pick up a length of chain and haul over my shoulder. 5 strong backs should be enough. This is idiotic, says the colonel as Carol leaves. We will all die if we carry this burden. The prisoners start shuffling towards the door, urged on by me carrying as much chain in their arms as they can. The colonel steps aside as we watch the opening, eyeing me with a grimace. You'd love that, wouldn't you? I tell him, meeting his stare. Prove yourself right about me. You're wrong. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not leaving these people. If you want to help them, put a las bolt in them, but do not risk all of our lives for this. I shoulder past him. Frag you. Well, one of the fun thing that this book does introduce is an uncertain chain of command, a shaky chain of command. I mean, I guess that the prisoner chain in a way represents the chain of command. It's just a terrible burden. Cage is absolutely just compensating right now. He doesn't want what the colonel thinks about him to be true because he believes he truly has changed. So the prisoners aren't really prisoners. They're more like consequences. In the end, it seems that it is quicker to just carry the emaciated prisoners. There are no stake to walk any distance at all. With the load spread over 20 people, it's hardly any burden. Each of them is so starved they don't weigh that much. A few minutes on, we're into unknown territory. Most of our scouting and raids against the orcs is west of here, through a maze of broken hab spaces and empty manufactories. Is there a map? Is there a, because he goes to this junction, that station, this. I would like to know exactly, the map would be helpful, I guess. The third book had a map. It was just an advertisement for the toys. There's a toy advertisement in full color. In full color. I don't even know if. Yeah, another advert. You see, they'll do the toy advertisements. This area we're heading into, what the locals call Mire Crack, is a wasteland half flooded with toxic filth that's been eaten away at the hive foundations for centuries, probably millennia. Very unstable, very dangerous. Also empty of orcs, which is the only point in its favor. We're not out of downrun territory yet, though. It's about half a kilometer ahead and a kilometer down until we reach the first level of the Myers Crack. I avoid the colonel, losing myself among the front of the mob, while he takes up the rear again. I can't work out if I'm sticking it to him or if he deliberately has goaded me into rescuing the prisoners. I thought I knew what I wanted, what I believed, but his reappearance has turned my thoughts upside down. This colonel, says Carol, sticking close to my right. What's he got in mind for us? When we get out, I mean. I don't think he has anything in mind. What's your point? We're all deserters. If he thinks he's heading back to the Imperial lines with smiles and handshakes, he came here for me, I tell him, but chose to leave out the part where my body was as good as me still breathing. I was the one that said everyone had to come, or I wasn't leaving. You said that? I'm the burned man. I look after my people, I say to him, tapping the muzzle of my last pistol against the wooden flame plaque. I remember when you started wearing these. Thought it was a joke at first. I mean, why would you want to remind me of getting all burnt alive all the time? It wasn't for you, he says. It's a reminder to us of what you've done, of what you went through for us. It's been a long while since I talked to anybody that was there at the beginning. With all the distractions of being in charge, I've kind of forgotten. You burned yourself, purging your sins through the flames, Carol continues. I can barely see him in the lamplight, but there's a glisten of tears in his eyes. He doesn't look at me. Gaze fixed ahead, as though seeing something else. His hands start to tremble, knife and pistol shaking with the power of memory. You showed us what could be endured if we had faith. When the beast came here the first time, the Emperor gave us Blessed Yarick and Lord Dante, and we found the courage to fight, and we won. When the beast came back, you got Von Strab. He glances at me, pure hate in his eyes. Yes, Von Strab, the traitor. Carol shakes his head. Sold us out. Not even to the beast, but one of his warlords. And those poor bastards, he jerks a thumb towards the prisoners being carried behind us, are just a few of those that have suffered. I haven't told him that we only came for Von Strab because an Inquisitor was going to declare Exterminatus an Archeum hive. That effect on morale of the turncoat Imperial commander's treachery was so dangerous that Oriel was willing to kill 1 billion people to stop it. I hadn't even known we were coming here to Armageddon. Just taking one long, crazy, inducing warp jump most of the way across the galaxy. That's when my little helper, the abyssal messenger, must have slipped inside my thoughts. Looking back, the warp dreams got worse towards the end, and that's when it must have been riding my soul. A year in the warp, that's just not a good plan for anybody. I also didn't tell them about the messenger that played my worst fears and deepest lusts and most awful passions against me, taking me over in a moment of bloodthirst. One that saw me kill one of my friends. I forget to mention that I sided with von Strab, turned on the colonel and the others, and was helping execute them at the moment Obheb's presence dulled the evil spirit's effect, just long enough for me to take full control of my body again. You were willing to die to save us from von Strab, says Carol, swallowing hard, to throw yourself into the flames, to protect Archeon and Armageddon. I did, I reply. I wanted it to end. That's all I remember as I fell down that artificial chasm. All my life, fighting to survive. I'd found a chance to end it properly. The colonel brought me here to save my soul, and that's what I was able to do. But the Emperor sent it back. There's wonder in his voice. Spared you the flames. I say nothing, ignoring Carol for a moment to strain my ears and eyes for any sign of the downhive orcs. This place is a mess of metal creaks and groans, not to mention the sound of our passing. But my paranoia tells me there are other sounds, something out of place. I hold my finger to my lips for quiet and signal the others to stop moving. Tapping, an incessant rapping on the pipes, echoing from somewhere to our left. That's a signal, I hiss, turning back towards the crowd around me. Run! Before anybody responds, the distinct snap of lasgun sounds from ahead, where the scouts are. Shit! Too late! The panic that took hold in the sump hall returns with a vengeance. Half the people start bolting down the passageway, heading towards the fighting. The others want to run the other way, but are blocked by the colonel and his troopers. As the demands to pass become shriller, he faces the derision of letting them pass or opening fire. He allows them to go, his undersized platoon parting to let them dash back towards the orcs spilling in from Uphive. The last fire ahead increases. I can see flashes reflected from the walls, 100 meters or so from my position, matched by the occasional darker muzzle flare and thump of an orc weapon. Fortunately, the downruns aren't all that good at maintaining guns or making ammo. Unfortunately, they are still good at getting a sharp edge on a blade or driving spiky bits into the scalp. And that's where the orcs are at their nastiness, up close, in your face. Which is why Nazrek is already shouldering its way forward, roaring in happy expectation. Most of its shouts seem like wordless bellows, occasionally broken by a smash, blast, or crump. Form on me. Get a firing line, I yell, heading after the orc, taking a cluster of ex-troopers with me. A glance back confirms that the colonel is coming forward as well, leaving those fleeing to delay the orcs coming at us from behind. What about them? Asks Carol, flicking a thumb towards the group carrying the virtually unconscious former prisoners. I raise my voice as I run, trying to be heard over the swelling noise of the fearful mob. If you have a gun, get to the front. If you don't have a gun, get behind somebody with the gun. If you find a gun, pick it up and get to the front. I can hear orcish voices among the snap of firing and the curses of my people. A woman trips in front of me, and I have to slow to stoop and help her up. She starts to thank me, but I shove her back to her companions and carry on. No time for pleasantries. Nazrek has surged about 20 meters ahead. Its heavy pistol booms as it reaches the skirmish line, the red flare of its shot illuminating the antechamber, where the scouts are holding out. Through the strobe of lasfire and sparks of orc bullets, I see the enemy in a tunnel beyond, ducking, crawling through a knot of pipework. A flashing image of snarling fangs and beady red eyes. Fire discipline, I yell, matching up with the scouts and Carol's rough platoon. Mark your targets. Way to fire. We've had enough tangles with orcs that they should know better. Nazareth calls them runts, but they're as big as a human, maybe a bit wirier in build, but that's all muscle and meanness. They're tougher than a Navy biscuit. So one lasgun hit maybe gets their attention, two annoys them. And you need 4 or 5 to do any serious damage. But then you got to pour it on. Bullets are just about the same. I take aim with my pistol, sighting an orc, about 5 meters away, dropping down from the hatch in the wall. Carol's next to me, and we open fire at the same time, aiming high. More chance of hitting the throat. I, open mouth. A small fire team grows around us as the others join in, taking out each orc in turn, closest first, then the next, firing until they go down, and then firing some more. Normally, we bring in the flamers, but there's no point blocking our route ahead with burning promethium. The clatter of the autoguns takes me back to my youth in the Underhive of Olympia, but it's the zip of a lasgun that I know the best. The standard issue of the Imperial Guard, backbone of the Astra Militarum. It's a soothing sound for me. To hear that weapon firing means I'm still here. The bastards haven't got me yet. So many battles, so close to dying that many times. It's stupid that it feels comforting. This way too! Comes a shout from the corridor adjoining the junction. We've been pushing forward. I can't break away. There's a dozen more orcs coming straight at us. A few start snapping off shots from crude pistols, the heavy slugs slamming to the pipework above, or tearing chunks of plascrete from the walls. A lucky shot hits a man in the left, taking out the right side of his face. He falls back with a yell, blood spraying the side of my robe. Someone get his gun, I shout, trying to find the shooters in the gloom. Forced to duck and dodge a renewed burst of bullets from ahead, our fire lessens and the orcs make headway. 3 of them reach the opening, shrugging off lasgun beams as they charge through the doorway. Carol tries to meet them head on, a sudden rush of blood perhaps. He should know better. A cleaver swipe takes his hand off, and the second blow digs deep into his chest. The orc stands over his body, trying to lever his weapon out, while the 2 others pile forward. Keep shooting! I back away, following my own order, putting 3 las bolts in the side of the closest orc's head. The tough bone gives way to the third, eyeball in orbit exploding. The junction is filled with blinding blasts as we open fire, bullets flashing just a few meters and scoring green skin, bullets tearing into hardened flesh. Snarling, the orcs thrash through the storm, more than following. A knife as long as my forearm finds the throat of a woman to my right, moments before the orc slumps at her feet, the woman's arterial spray coating its falling body. The other orc has chains wrapped around its fists, as lethal as any hammer or axe, and batters away with them, long arms picking up deadly momentum with each swing. 2 of my fighters go down, faces broken, chest bludgeoned. The one with the cleaver has freed its weapon and balls at us, spit flying, fangs glinting in laslight. The shadow of more filled the corridor behind. Nazareth arrives like a green killdozer, slamming through us with a deafening bellow. Its self-made pistol, too big for me to carry in one hand, barks with it. High-bore rounds crafted by Grot, smashing the cleaver orc to a pulp with raw impact. Nazareth leaps at the second, clubbing the pistol into his jaw. Bone cracks and green blood flies. A backhanded blow slams the other orc against the wall, neck snapping. I don't think orcs have green blood. I think they have red blood. I'm fairly certain they'd have red blood, but they don't actually have blood, not like we do. It's just, it would be impossible basically to paint a bloody orc because you're going to put green on green. I mean, a bloody demon, demons don't really bleed, so red on red isn't really quite the same. But no, orcs bleed red because it just makes sense, and that's, you're wrong, Gab Thorpe. You're wrong about that one. I'll take you I'll take you straight to the Black Library and prove it there. On the other hand, Nazrek carries a choppa, 80 centimeters of sharp steel, bastard offspring that had a sword for a mother and an axe for a father. I think a choppa is just an axe. Or it's a cleaver, actually. It's a choppa is a cleaver. Well, I guess that's a good way to put it, Gav. This terrible blade catches the next foe on the side of the head, taking off cheek, ear, and scalp with one blow. Incredibly, the down run isn't done. It leaps at Nazrek, jaws open. My bodyguard smashes it in the chest with the grip of his pistol and discards the weapon to grab the other orc's throat. The choppa finishes the job it started, taking off the rest of the head, which flies over me, dribbling droplets of blood. Support! I call out, stepping after Nazrek as the orc plows in the next foe, tusks driving into its throat as it literally bites its face off. For all its power and violence, even Nazrek would get surrounded and beaten down if left in a zone against the massing orcs. We open fire when we can, past Nazrek's rampage, knives, mauls, and close-range pistol shots when needed. One of the runs slips past the bigger orc and comes at me, a hooked pick in one hand, the claws of the other slashing at my face. I've faced enough orcs now that I know the only thing that helps us is speed. I duck inside the swing of the pick, knowing that if I don't take out my enemy in the next 3 seconds, it'll come down into my head or back. Claws scrabble at my shoulder, but I ignore the pain. Driving the point of my knife through the bottom of the projecting jaw and through the soft tissue of the plate in the brain above, I fire my pistol, the last bullet searing the side of my face with proximity before hitting the orc's eye. Something that was really cool about the game that isn't really there, and that's kind of what he's talking about, are the initiative steps. They Games Workshop replaced initiative steps with speed, which I can see how that would basically be an approximation, but what you're losing in translation there is the orcs have like some, when they walk, they almost always get some like preposterous speed boost that makes them as fast or faster than a vehicle. And so it basically, by taking initiative out of the game, it removed the one thing the orcs were really bad at, which is initiative. I mean, a human would be able to dance around an orc at least for a little bit, up until the point where the orc touches the human, and then it's over, completely over. But it at least gave those brave Imperial Guardsmen. It gave them one stat that wasn't that bad, which was that initiative step. And if they went at the same time as the orcs, or even after, there would be no Guardsmen left. The Necrons also used to suffer this, but now they're just as fast as a Space Marine, and that's another thing is a Space Marine can just take his bolter and just like just bop as many heads as he wishes. He used to be able to do that before, but now he just goes at the same time as everyone else. I think speed is dumb. I liked it when it's like, oh, this is infantry. But I'm boomer posting right now. I'm always gonna say the old way was better. That I'm glad, Gav Thorpe, that you didn't forget about how initiative works. I'll give you that one, okay? We're even now. All right. The blood is red, but initiative does exist. I fire my pistol, the las bolt searing the side of my face with its proximity before hitting the orc's eye. The pick blow never comes, and I shrug off the spasming corpse just in time to throw myself aside from the blade of another orc that is broken past. My companions bury it with lasgun butts and blades, battering and hacking the creature until it's decapitated and dismembered. In its death throes, it breaks Sebastian's leg, sending him howling to the ground. A minute later, and we've broken through into some kind of hall, about 40 meters square, perhaps a power station. Its workings long since looted for other purposes. There's no light except our lamps and gunfire, but in the sweeping beams, there doesn't seem to be many orcs. The yellow gleam of a lantern pans across a high arch on the opposite side, leading to a broad corridor. Hold here. Get everybody down there, I call to my people, directing them to the Faircrete outcrops. Some of you take the lights. Keep them moving. The crowd breaks into the hall and runs towards the exit, bobbing headlamps, ushering them towards the archway. I swap out the power cell in my pistol. One more reload left, 100 shots total, and snap off a few bolted orcs lurking around doorways and inspection pits to our left. I typically look at las guns and auto guns as basically just being the same thing. I mean, I think that an auto gun has, or back when this mattered, and it almost never mattered. I think that an auto gun. Let's see. I think that an auto gun. Let's see. I think that an auto gun. Yeah, an auto gun is basically a las gun, but it has like it can take out orc armor, which is cool. I think they're the same now, but that's pretty big. If a las pistol magazine can carry 100 shots, like to put things into perspective, a combat soldier in the army in the modern army will carry 210 rounds, which is 7 magazines. Okay, and they can carry more than that, but that's like the standard amount because you can piss that away in 2 or 3 minutes. And so if a las pistol has 100 shots in it, I mean the las gun magazine, even if it just has 100 shots, that's nuts. That you don't even have to issue vests to hold extra magazine. Just one soldier, one magazine. You're basically getting the most you'll ever get out of them. A 100 shots left. 100 shots with a pistol. I mean, you could. That's like a whole day. That's a whole day at the range. That's a whole day at the range. I would probably end up having my favorite magazine at this point. I'd end up naming my magazines. This one over here has 101 shot. This one only has 99, but I like it. I put a little pendant on it. 100 shots in a pistol. He needs to figure out how to make that automatic immediately. That would be the next leap. Is just a fully automatic 100-shot pistol. Okay, they're still running, and the orc keeps shouting about the big green. Big green hurting, not body. Keep going, I urge them. Don't look back. They keep going. Okay, they get Nazarek to abandon the fight. Great. They convince an orc not to fight. In the great scheme of things, it's not the most scared I've been. That horror goes to the night spent in the Battle Sisters Chapel in Deliverance, waiting for the Tyranids, watching thousands of their spores falling from orbit. Listening to that thunder comes pretty close, though. I'm not the only one affected. I see nervous glances back from those running across the massive space, And the veterans around me have a look in their eye I know well, a telltale tremble in their hands. We are too late. I don't say it. No need to. Everyone within earshot knows it. I exchange a look with the colonel. If you run now, you can outpace these others, he says. Perhaps get to safety. There is nothing you can do to protect them. It's like he's been taken over by the voice inside my head, bringing it out in the open. Damn him. Emperor damn his icy gaze and nonchalant temptation. Still on that, are you? Think I'll just cut and run? I move away before he can reply, raising my voice to those around me. We have to protect the retreat, I tell him. Buy time for them to get away. A lot of them aren't listening, already running across the empty expanse of the chamber. A few slow down, look back, and then carry on. That is your plan, says the colonel, to stand here and shoot until they reach you? Better an axe in the face than in the back, I say. Though the thought of an orc axe hitting me anywhere gives me a shudder. Not clean, not quick at all. If the Emperor really watches over me, I'll get one of those stupidly big bullets in the head. Nice and simple. I suggest we take up a better position over there, says the colonel, pointing to an uneven section of the floor where a ramp leads down to a series of trenches and inspection pits, about 200 meters further on. Others have heard him and break into a run, giving me no choice but to follow. After a few strides, I realize that Nazarek isn't coming with us. It stands, shaking visibly, staring back the way we came. Nazarek! The orc doesn't answer. Grot weaves in and out of Nazarek's legs in agitation, altering between muttering and screeching. I run back to them, slamming my hand hard on the orc's back. Slowly, as though trying to wake up, the orc turns red eyes on me, a scowl of rage, furrowing its brown arm, lifting the choppa above me. We're going to wait for them down here, I say, jabbing a thumb towards the dips. Tactics, remember? There's no comprehension for a few seconds. Maybe the green is too much, overwhelming the small bit of humanity Nazarek has taken on. I've been such an idiot, fooling myself into forgetting that this thing is a killer, pure and simple. For an instant, I see nothing but murder in the alien's eyes and tremble as I expect the chopper to come down, hewing me in half. Nazarek's lips ripple, showing teeth. It grunts from deep in its chest and nods. Tactics! The orc lowers the chopper, and I turn away. It lumbers alongside me, grot at our heels. A burst of fire erupts from the troops ahead, but before we reach the sanctuary of the pits. I don't bother heading for a ramp, just jump straight down, but misjudge the drop. I land hard, almost breaking my ankle. Nazarek thuds down next to me and turns, the heavy pistol in its fist, almost immediately barking poorly aimed shots. There are more of us than I realized. Some of the others must have taken cover before us, but I hadn't noticed. Maybe 50 guns waiting for the orcs as they spill from the brightly lit passageway into the echoing vastness. They're bigger than the runts, each at least a head taller and almost twice as broad. Smaller than Nazarek, I think, but that's little comfort. The orc roars a challenge, louder than the snarl of autoguns. A brass hollering returns from the oncoming horde, a gathering to a single, wordless bellow that rolls like a physical wave across us. I start firing, barely having to pick my targets. The orcs coming at us in a thick mass, pounding after us at speed. Their aim is worth less than an old rasher in a card game. Bullets pinging from the tiles in front or whirling overhead. They approach, a couple of 100 meters away, and I can see more detail. Checks and dags painted on the sides of their scavenged armor. Some of the larger specimens with black banners displaying orcish glyphs. Nazarek taught me a few, and I recognized some of the shapes. Death, stab, break, smash. They could be names or boasts or threats. It's impossible to tell the difference. The onrushing horde starts to split. Our position is about 50 meters aside from the line between the entrance and the exit, and a good chunk of the orcs are heading straight after the last of the others, bunching together as they're trying to get out. The rest come straight at us. If we leave now to intercept the group going after the fleeing crowd, we'll just get cut down. I try to focus my frustration on something useful, but find myself snapping off shots hurriedly. The anger, like a pounding in my head. A crazy notion grips me. To clamber out of the pit and charge headlong at the orcs, to cut them down with my knife. Through the shooting, I hear curses and threats, even some laughter from the troops around me. I can feel their battle lust, like nothing I've experienced before. A jade glow follows the group coming at us. Arcs of green energy lick up, while sparks dance from the blade tips and helmets, casting erratic shadows. Behind them, even more orcs are pouring into the cavernous hall, but they're not coming towards us, following the wake of those heading straight across the open ground. Nazareth grunts something, and a fresh surge of green light bubbles around the orc assault force. What was that? I ask. Weird boy, it says, tapping the side of its head with the smoking muzzle of its pistol. Magnet for the big green. Brain powers. Real headbanger. As if to illustrate Nazareth's meaning, the orcs part, revealing a garishly dressed orc, more like a runt than a full-grown warrior. Gangling, holding a staff in its hands, topped by a sun symbol, loops of metal around its arms and neck, green sparks swarming like flies around it. The sparks coalesce into a shimmering green fist, and Schaefer hollers a warning an instant before the apparition howls towards us. I throw myself down. Out of the corner of the eye, I see a blaze of green energy smashing the edge of the pit a few meters away, and hear the painted shout of one of my people as she staggers back, arm and head alight with green flames. Nazareth lets rip with a deafening howl, head tilted back. At first, I think he's been hit, but as I watch green sparks flicker from fangs and eyes, I realize it's a moment of joy, not pain. Something to do with the big green, I guess. Firing more shots at the green horde still piling towards us. Even as I shoot, I can't help but glance over the big, even larger tide of alien warriors simply running past us, bellowing and roaring as they head straight across the hall. I can imagine some of them going after the easier prey of the fleeing crowd. But it's not like orcs to ignore an actual ongoing fight. What are they doing? I asked Nazareth, smacking the orc on the shoulder to get its attention. Ropes of drool fall from its bulbous lips as it looks over at the other Xenos. Nazareth's brows knit together, making ravines of its green forehead. Look like running away. Chilling sensation creeps up my back as these words sink in. Suddenly, I see the orcs in a completely different light. Yells and snarls of fear, not anger. Desperation, not bloodthirst. Colonel, they're not coming after us. They are running away. Schaefer pauses between bursts of autogun fire and looks over at me, a moment of confusion becoming an uncharacteristic look of concern. He voices the question I'm trying to avoid. Running from what? I'm really in no mood to find out, but we're all out of options. The orcs are too close for us to make a break for it, and too many to hope we can fight it out. Looking at the green skinned creatures bearing down on us, I gained something of the calm clarity that wrapped me in its embrace as I fell into the fire chasm. I thought then that perhaps it was just certainty, the knowledge of a coming end, a death that can't be avoided. Perhaps it was something more, like the touch of the Emperor. We have to buy time for the rest to get away, I say, bringing my pistol round to the others. The pressure in my head is pounding now, and an odd quiet descends like a fog. My heart is smashing against my chest, trying to pound its way out, but my hand and aim is sure. I pull the trigger, and a bolt of red light flares into the orcs. I shoot again and again. It's impossible to miss hitting something, but I try to track a target, to score multiple hits in the hope of bringing one of its tough aliens down. Nobody seems to have followed my lead. Through my hammering pulse, I sense a change around me. Cage? It's not the first time the colonel has barked my name. I turn sluggishly, teeth gritting, trying to focus on his face through a swirl of red mist. It's just the ruddy lights, I'm sure. The others are moving, heading toward the ramp. I don't understand why. My gaze moves to the orcs that were charging towards us. Their impetus has slowed. They're turning around, raising weapons towards something behind them. The weird boy shrieks, and another blast of emerald energy leaps into the gloom, directed by the pursuers. Maybe it's my mumbling dies as I focus on what is behind the tide of orcs. Something big, 6, 7 meters tall, strides purposefully across the gloom. Wings broader than a gunship's stretched behind it, and a bestial face racked with unimaginable rage glowers at everything before it. Each clawed fist bears an axe that glimmers with sickly black light. The motion of the blades as it advances, leaving bleeding cuts in the air itself. It is clad in bronze armor that shimmers with heat, vapors coiling from flared nostrils. A furnace heat precedes it, tinged with the stench of hot blood. Bullets bounce from its armor and hide as though striking a battle tank, leaving a shower of blunted projectiles around it. I turn and run. Raw instinct takes over, putting one feet in front of the other again and again without me having to think about it, which is just as well because my brain is both a blank and a crash of conflicting thoughts. Nothing settles in my mind, just a whirl of dread, hope, and anger. There's a sense of release as well, freedom, a freedom I didn't realize I'd missed. But the sensation burns through me, carrying me on even more swiftly. I could be running forever. Everything is mayhem around me. Orcs and humans crowding the gate together, united in our blind need to get away from the death at our backs. Hoarse yells and higher-pitched screams combined into a constant noise of terror. Unable to go further in the press, I turn around, about 5 meters from the archway. I wish I hadn't. The monster looms over the thinning crowd of Xenos, hewing left and right with its nightmare axes, every sweep slashing through a handful of orcs. I hear its bellows in the back of my mind, a brass punch inside my skull that brings to harsh reality the growing pressure of the last few days. Looking upon the beast, incarnation of murder, fills me with a lightness of spirit, and for an instant, I crave to be with it, seeing its power and majesty. Then pure dread kicks in again, the color fading from the scene, and to the ruddy pulsing of the lights in my heartbeat. I see the mangled corpses of hundreds of orcs reflecting the Slayer's armor, distorted and sheen with blood. Around the monstrosity swells a red surge of smaller abyssal creatures, about the height of a man hunched over, with bulbous heads and dead white orbs for eyes. They carry triangular blades with glinting edges, long forked tongues licking over orc blood from serrated teeth. Some are bigger, black horns curling from their brows, plated in ornate ancient armor. The air churns with a bloody mist, partly real droplets of life fluid streaming from the carnage, partly the distortion of reality, where the abyssal warp tries to bleed into the mortal world. More shapes ride through the death fog of immense brazen steeds, ridden by axe-wielding Neverborn and bat-winged maws that stoop like vultures over the slaughter. From the orc throng explodes a bolt of green energy, swirling like a maddening serpent as it scythes through the ranks of the Neverborn warriors. Arcs of green power leap from the orc psyker, some of them burning through the eyes of the neighbors, others lancing away into the abyssal masses to explode with clouds of sparks. As the red-skinned creatures converge on the orc, its discharges become more erratic and even more violent. It spins on the spot, caught in a whirlwind of its own energy, blasts of random fire flaring from the twister. Shuddering to a halt, the orc drops to its knees, copper staff falling from its fingertips, made of flame. Shuddering, the alien arches its back, massive jaw opening to vomit a stream of jade fire. The torrent of psychic energy continues, becoming brighter and faster, incinerating abyssal servants by the dozen, until the orc detonates with a green mushroom cloud, leveling its companions. The vortex of its destruction rippling apart even more than Everborn. I remember Nazareth words. A real headbanger. A hand on my shoulders jolts me from the view of its hellish half-lizard horns bounding from the remains of the psyker. Their jowls joining and bellows of rage with scrapping blades. Schaefer! He's recovered some of his composure, but I can tell by the way his eyes flick from me to the oncoming abyssal army that he's about as scared as he's ever been. Without a word, he drags me into the morass of humans and orcs, and together, surrounded by a knot of troopers, we ride the living wave into the corridor beyond. With the air almost crushed from me by the close packed bodies, I have no choice but to go with the flow of panicked masses. I concentrate on keeping my feet, knowing that to fall now would be going under a stampede of footfalls, crushed in moments. I'm sure I step on other people, the flat ferrocrete becoming disturbingly bumpy and soft now and then. But I can't look down, even if I want to. Eyes fixed ahead, elbows and shoulders muscling my way along with the others. I can feel the back of my head prickling through the intense heat. The physical high of action is draining away, replaced by more lingering dread. Not only of the things that can't be so far behind us, but also of what happens now, surrounded by dozens of orcs flooding into totally unknown territory. This mob could charge over the edge of an acid pit, and we'd never know until it was too late. Strangely, though, my brain doesn't seem to be in the mood for coming up with coherent plans. I check our surroundings in more detail. Corridor, about 20 meters wide, 30 meters high, vaulted roof, a lot of the network ripped out by scavengers, barricade crumbling and cracked in between. Been moving from gateway for the last couple minutes, probably covered at least half a kilometer. There are other archways leading off from the main concourse, heading to Emperor knows where. There seems to be a simple choice: stick with the crowd or try to force my way out and go alone. Pack instinct is a powerful force, even when half of that pack are slab muscled green alien that would gouge out my face if given half a chance. On the other side, nagging at me with the intensity of a corporal I once knew, is the thought that I'd be better off by myself. The answer is almost given to me as the passageway breaks into a number of small halls and dormitories, unlit but for patches of luminescent fungal growth. The mob splinters, underhivers and xenos still come together, and some go left and right, others slowing as they consider their options, creating eddies in this retreat like swirls in a stream. Burnt man! Someone calls out, recognizing me through the throng. I, I feel tapping on my shoulder and look left. One of my followers, reaching out with desperate fingers to get my attention. His face is a rictus of fear, cheeks coated in tears, eyes red, short hair plastered to her scalp. Lead us to salvation, burned man! Her words fire up a feeling of hope, reminding me that the Emperor is watching over us, even in this dire time. And if he really has a purpose for me, he'll guide me to it, despite the circumstances. A bit of faith is required. This way, I shout, dragging an arm free to point on the direction I want to go. A side passageway, where a lot of my followers are already headed. Is that right? The colonel shouts over the noise of the fleeing mob. Where does that lead? Bloody well away from here, I tell him with a half-mad laugh, because I don't have a clue where we're going. And a better plan? I don't wait for an answer, but gather myself to push sideways against the flow of people. The very act of resistance causes some of them to change direction, like damming a stream, and a splinter of several people breaks away with me, heading to the near pitch black of the tunnel. The thing about orcs, and this might sound cliche, but there's never been an orc that has ever retreated. They only regroup. They only regroup. But to get them to do that, you really have to shake them to the core.